The Razer Game Store is closing down after just 10 months, and will cease operations on February 28. The digital storefront was opened by Razer in April 2018, and sold keys for existing platforms like Steam and Uplay. The marketplace also offered exclusive Razer discounts and Razer Silver rewards that could be redeemed against other games and peripherals. Razer did not specify exactly why it has decided to turn its back on the storefront, simply explaining the decision is part of its wider realignment plans. All games purchased through the Razer Game Store will still work after the closure, while pre-orders will also be fulfilled. What's more, all Razer Silver earned through Game Store purchases will still be valid, and can be used to redeem rewards after the store has shut down. You can find out more about the closure by checking out the Razer Game Store FAQ. Shigeru Miyamoto shares his thoughts on Nintendo's current game development efforts. Despite the 27 million strong install base Nintendo now has with the Nintendo Switch, the company's leadership is hesitant to put the quality of its first-party releases at risk in order to get more titles out the door. The topic of POD spending with the goal of bolstering the number of first-party Switch releases in the next few years was brought up during a recent investor Q&A, with the goal of supplying existing Switch owners with a steady stream of new games. In response, Nintendo's Shigeru Miyamoto points out that the company's third-party partnerships mean that we are working on a larger scale than what can be handled solely within the company in terms of managing software development. But even despite that, he says that any expansion of Nintendo's development scale must firmly maintain the Nintendo mid-quality of the software. I know some people say we just need to hire more developers, says Miyamoto. We are not merely focused on increasing development staff, but we are focusing on nurturing more developers adequately within Nintendo. I want us to actively invest in the products we develop, in order to maintain the quality we desire. Nintendo's current development cadence, especially in regards to how it's changed across the lifetime of the company, was something also mentioned earlier on in the Q&A by Nintendo director and senior managing executive officer Shinya Takahashi. Compared to the NES era, there are a lot more developers, larger development teams, says Takahashi. Even so, development is being managed more systematically than before. So although it's true that the volume of software is increasing, there are more people involved in developing it. There are more development processes in place to bring it all together, and the development scale has expanded. I believe one appealing aspect of the video game business is that you can create something a lot of consumers will react very positively to if you add just a little extra value, even if it's not dependent on hardware performance. As Miyamoto in response to that same question, there are indie games spreading widely across consumers, even though those titles were not large-scale titles developed by many people. We always value this point and want to nurture the people who can create core components like that. And if we can continue to repeatedly refine the core components of play that those individuals create into the future, I think we will be able to continue creating Nintendo-like products. And I feel that those individuals are steadily growing at Nintendo. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate surpassed 3 million sales in the U.S. during its first 11 days on shelves, according to Nintendo's own internal sales data. That makes Ultimate the fastest-selling Switch game of all time in the States, and also the fastest-selling title in the Super Smash Bros. franchise. The massive brawler has been performing well in other regions as well, having sold 1.23 million copies in Japan during its launch weekend, another record for the series. Meanwhile, Nintendo also revealed the Switch has been the fastest-selling current-gen console in the U.S. for the past 21 months, having sold more than 8.7 million units in that time. Those hardware sales, however, do not account for the launch of Ultimate, which Nintendo claims will give the Switch extra impetus as the holidays continue. Each of Sega's Yakuza games contains modded use. For example, Yakuza 0, the series prequel released outside of Japan early last year, sets itself up as a playable crime serial set in ATS Japan. But it can also be a cabaret management game, a blind date sim, a 3D beat 'em up, an emulator of old Sega arcade classics, a rhythm game, a light-hearted RPG about solving strangers' problems, a real estate management game, and a surprisingly good place to learn the basics of tabletop games, like shogi and mahjong. From a developer's perspective, the scope of such a project seems daunting. From a player's perspective, it can be overwhelming. My partner and I recently completed Yakuza 0, and saw that our 87 hours of combined play merited a completion score of roughly 33%. The hook that holds together all these disparate game design elements that put us on the spot of Western players like us through the game is the writing. For all its focus on cold-hearted criminals and petty evil, Yakuza 0 is a remarkably funny game. It affords players the freedom to quickly jump from incredibly serious macabre scenes, a criminalist tortured in a warehouse, to teach a shy punk band to act like good rude dudes in public. That writing is translated and localized for the West by Atlus, alongside longtime series translator Inbound, starting with Yakuza 0 and continuing on through Yakuza Kiwami, the remake of the original 2005 game, and Yakuza 6. The localization of all three games has been overseen by Atlus Scott Strichart, who recently sat down to chat about the ins and outs of adapting these games, humor and gravity for Western players. It was an interesting conversation that went beyond the localization process. Atlus uses a translator-editor tag team approach, rather than relying on translators alone, to touch on how exactly you translate humor, and how players in different regions can view a game or its characters completely differently. What follows is a version of that conversation we have edited for clarity. Strichart, the humor of a Yakuza game is a fine line to walk. It's very clear when the developers want to be funny. It's very clear to us when the writing that exists in the game is supposed to be like, haha, here's a joke. So we just want to make sure that if they intended for it to be funny, it also has to be funny to our audience. Whether or not that means changing the dialogue a little bit, changing the style in which it's delivered, making dialogue options a little bit more punchy, that kind of thing. One of the perfect examples is, in Yakuza 0, Majima encounters this. Did you play the sub-story where he goes to infiltrate a cult? In that sub-story, one of the options he has is to crack a pen, in order to get this girl to snap out of her cult tendencies. So in Japanese, that pun is futon or futon dog, which means a futon is a futon, or a futon flies. It's a pun on words. It's basically a why did the chicken cross the road kind of joke. If we literally translated that, it would not work. If we put in, why did the chicken cross the road, it's not much of a pun. It does not feel in line with Majima's character. So that's where we had to come up with this pun. that we ultimately went with, which was, how do you avoid dangerous codes? Practice safe sects. Well, it was not just me. We have a team of translators and editors who approach these games. These games are massive. If they were left to just me, I'd be buried under each of these games for years. Most of these Yakuza games actually are on par, are greater than your average drug. In terms of volume of text, Yakuza 0 is 1.8 million JPC, Japanese characters.